G'day and welcome to this really quick analysis of Chapter 11 of Kate Constable's Crow Country. Now this is a really short chapter, this one, and it focuses very heavily on relationships here, so we're going to be looking a lot at the characters and their conflict. If we start just with this first quotation, let's launch straight into it. After a few minutes, Walter said, without taking his eyes from the screen, "They're arguing." "What?" Sadie shot an alarmed glance towards the sliding door that separated the living room from the kitchen. "I can't hear anything." So to put this in a bit of context, after they've just come back from the pub, we can see that both Ellie and David have gone off into the kitchen to make some coffee, and it's evolved into a little bit of an argument here. And it's interesting that Walter's the one who's aware of it. He's very aware of his surroundings, and he senses the conflict in the other room when Sadie's completely unaware. It's almost as if she's still reeling from the events that happened at the pub, and Walter's just let that brush off him. He's not as distracted by those sorts of things. Let's keep going. And at this point here, Ellie pinpoints the difficulties. She makes it really obvious for the audience. "Isn't it obvious? You and me. Some people have trouble with it. You must know that by now." So, in a more enlightened sort of world where that sort of thing was not a problem for people to have interracial relationships, we mightn't think twice about that. But in this place, in the town of Bort, that's certainly not the done thing. And by challenging that, these two characters are really creating waves for the town of Bort, and they're going to continue to be judged for doing so. So it's an interesting conflict. It's certainly not one that should happen, and it's one of the reasons why this book is created, to get us to question why these different opinions still exist in our society today. Down here we've got this nice quotation. Ellie said, "I thought we could all just move on, you know. Let the past stay in the past. Forgive and forget. I mean, what's the point of dredging up all that old history?" And this is a really interesting quotation because in some ways she's right. It's important to move on and to not allow the difficulties of the past to prevent us from living properly, to living our lives fully. But the whole purpose of this book, one of the really valuable lessons in this book, it tries to teach us the idea of righting the wrongs from the past before we can move on and before we can grow as an individual, before we can grow as a township, or before we can grow as a society, because this town is meant to represent more than just one place within Australia. It's meant to represent Australia as a whole almost. So whilst Ellie's right in some ways, she's also wrong in many others, whereas we must make amends for the mistakes of the past before we can move forward, before we can try to live a happier life in the future. And as this conversation, as this dialogue between Sadie and Ellie unfolds, Ellie reveals a lot about her history, where she says, "You know, I used to go out with Craig Mortlock," and when she's asked why she broke up, the reason is that she met David. So already you can see why there would be tension between people like Craig Mortlock and David when they go into the pub and they're seen together, because there's that history that's gone on there. And all of this was the sort of thing that Sadie was completely unaware of up until this point. So by explaining it to Sadie, the audience is having explained to them as well. Let's keep going, because there's some important things at the end here. As she continues, it's clear that Ellie's quite distracted or distraught in revealing this story, because it's a difficult one to talk about. And she reveals here that Craig and some of the others were waiting for them. They beat David up. He nearly drowned. And at last Ellie said, "I let David down back then. I didn't know what to do. I thought I loved David, but I knew I'd hurt Craig. I felt guilty. I thought it was all my fault. So I ran away. I never want to be a coward like that again. I've got another chance now. I can't wreck it this time. So those two ideas are very interrelated, and they're very strongly connected, obviously. Now, clearly Ellie feels guilty for what happened to David, even though she was not the one who perpetrated it. So she feels like she's got this sense that she must stand up and do something, which is exactly what we should all be doing about the racism in our society. If it's against Aboriginals or any other minority group within our society, we should feel that sense of obligation to stand up and do something, and that's what the book is trying to teach us here. And where it talks about Ellie running away, she doesn't want to do that again, that's exactly what Sadie needs to take on. Sadie's job, and it becomes more evident soon, is that she has to right the wrongs of the past, and she can't run away because it's happened in so many cycles previously. So that mantra, or that attitude, if you like, this great attitude of Ellie's, that she's got to get it right this time, she's got a second chance, she's got to fix it, she's got to make it okay, is exactly the idea that Sadie takes on. The past will keep haunting us if we don't essentially learn and fix our mistakes. This quote here, Sadie, she said, "But not talk about this, not to Lockie, or to Craig, or to David, or to Walter. There's no point stirring it all up again. Just keep it secret, okay?" So this is the second time Sadie's been trusted with some really important and sensitive information. She's trusted with another secret. And she's got a chance to redeem herself. When she was given the secret of the stones by Wah, she let Wah down by revealing that to Lockie, to try and share that with Lockie and build that connection. And we can see how poorly that unfolded. Her relationship with Lockie is in sort of dire straits at the moment. And so the chapter continues, but it ends with this great quotation. "And it was those cries that haunted her as she sank into a troubled sleep." It's as if she's reflecting on everything that's happened today. She thought she finally broke into some sort of relationship with Lockie, and then she saw his true colours at the pub. She wanted to have that relationship. She was infatuated with him in some ways, but then finally grew to understand the true nature of Lockie's character. Now there's still plenty of time, it's a long way to go in the text, so there's still a lot more to learn about these characters, but this quotation here is a great symbol of her inner turmoil, of Sadie's inner troubles, her inner conflict, and that the symbol of the sound here is, of the wah, is her way of taking that step back and going into that reflective sort of pose. Well, I hope that helps you with the chapter a little bit. It's a short one, it's an interesting one, but there's a lot in terms of the conflict that goes on here. And there are some good examples to pull out of this one if you needed to use any quotations relating to topics on, say, racism and certainly conflict and the relationship between mother and daughter. This has been an ETV production brought to you by Prendeville Catholic College.